Werner, did you turn your cell phone off?
I do not have a cell phone. I don't have to turn off anything. So, but I feel okay with it, and I'm not nostalgic. You know, I just want to live and have a real conversation with a real person.
Did you ever come close to getting a cell phone?
Sometimes I borrow a cell phone, which is used only as an emergency phone.
Right.
But that's all.
Is it, because I know one of the things that's in your book is you discuss all the, my father felt this way too. He was older than you. He was born in 1924. You were born in 42. My father couldn't imagine a future generation experiencing all the technological advancements that he had seen, that now you have seen over the course of your lifetime.
Yeah, sure, I have seen all sorts of technological advances, and it's hard to imagine for young people nowadays that I made my first phone call at the age of 17. But I've seen, you see, I've seen the village crier with a bell, and he would say, shout announcement, announcement, and then stop and make some announcements for the mayor's office.
Like here you hear, that was the news, that was the radio, that was the news.
Yes, it was like in medieval times. And of course I've seen radio, television, telephone, and now artificial intelligence all in one lifetime. That's unusual.
Is it good, this progress?
Well, you cannot say good or bad. It has glorious possibilities, and I'm not against technology. And when you look at the newest thing, artificial intelligence, it has phenomenal possibilities in, let's say, complex pharmaceuticals, where it would, if you by hand test enzymes, with scientists doing it in the lab, it would take them 200 years. But artificial intelligence can run tests in 4 hours and they come to a result. So it's phenomenal possibilities. At the same time, of course, we know it will be used for warfare, and that's why it gets scary. So we have to learn how to navigate in this world. We cannot make it undone. That's impossible.
It just strikes me that what you have to say about it is particularly interesting because, you know, you've been to more places in the world and talked to more people affected by the events of the world than arguably anyone alive. So, you know, when you answer that question about artificial intelligence and warfare and what it might do to how it might adversely affect people's lives, you have a sample size of a much greater part of the world than the rest of us have.
Yes, physical encounters, meaning, no, I say it again, my encounters with reality were always direct, the old-fashioned way. I shake the hand of somebody, I can embrace somebody, I travel on foot. That's where reality really starts to kick in. And I have been in wars with child soldiers, and I have been, you just name it, I have moved a ship over a mountain. It's physical, that's something present, and I do not want to miss it. That's part of how I function.
I believe I have this quote, dictum, correct. The world reveals itself to those who travel by foot?
Yes, that's how I try to explain the importance of moving on foot, because you are unprotected and you have to seek contact. Your canteen is empty and you're thirsty, and you have to knock at the door of a farmer and ask, can I fill my water bottle at your faucet?
Right. Can I come into your house, to your kitchen? Right?
Exactly, yes. Yeah. And of course they are startled. And they ask, where do you come from? And I say, I come from, I don't know, let's say Gary, Indiana. How did you come? I say, on foot. And from then on, there's something very ancient setting in hospitality. all of a sudden they open up and they help you and they assist you, show you the way, serve you a meal. You haven't asked for a meal, but they do it. And you see it in America and you see it everywhere.
I knew the title of your film is The Enigma of Caspar Hauser,
Yeah.
not this title. So my first exposure then to your book, it was sent to me as a PDF,
Yes.
right? It was sent in an email so I could
Right.
read it while traveling. And all that came across there was every man for himself, which I thought was
and God
hold on.
against-
Wait. So all that I saw was every man for himself. So I
Yeah.
thought that was the title of the book as I started reading it on my
Right.
Kindle, digitally. Then the hard copy of the book came when I got back
Yeah.
home. And the full title is Every Man for Himself and God Against All. And I thought, oh, well, that's the title of a Werner Herzog book. Like that, and God Against All made it Werner Herzog.
Well, in a way, the title is, you see, a title has to somehow jump at you. When you walk by at some books and you see this, you stop, man, what is this? So, but actually, I didn't invent it. I saw that in a film by a Brazilian filmmaker some 40 years back or so, or more than 40 years back. All of a sudden, in the dialogue, somebody says, every man for himself and God against all. And I just froze in delighted, and I said, that's the title of a film. And actually, the first title for my film, The Enigma of Caspar Hauser, was that title, and nobody got it right. God all in solitude and man fighting with each other, and you just name it. Nobody got it right. So, but since it is for a book, and people who read have a different attitude towards reading a title correctly, so I just gave it another shot. But in a way, it is almost like has become almost like a motto for my life.
It is a wonderful title, and it is a very you title at the same time. All right, so here in Every Man for Himself and God Against All, you have transcribed an interview that your mother gave about you
Yes.
growing up. And this is your mother talking. All the time he was at school, Werner never learned anything. He never read the books he was supposed to read. He never studied. It seemed he never knew the things he was meant to know. But then, in fact, Werner always knew everything. He could pick out some note or sound and 10 years later remember it exactly. He would talk about it and use it in some way. He's completely incapable of explaining anything. He's completely incapable of explaining anything. He knows, he sees, he understands, but he can't explain. It's not in his nature. With him, everything goes in, and if it comes out again, then it will be in some altered form. That is, I can't imagine a mother saying that about, it's very perceptive.
I hear her voice.
You
yes,
do?
It's like her. And of course, since I had this very intense life in the world itself, you absorb a lot and it stays dormant inside of you. Sometimes it's little things, sometimes it's big things. I was on foot with a donkey on the island of Crete, which is 220 kilometers stretched and high mountains. And with this donkey, all of a sudden the donkey stops and I stop and I look down into a valley with 10,000 windmills, like spinning flowers everywhere. And I thought, I have become insane, like my grandfather. And I said, this is too early. I'm only 16. I shouldn't be insane. And then it turns out it was really windmills, an incredible amount of windmills, shocking and deeply shaking me to the core. And it stayed in me. 10 years later, it comes out of me and it is a central image of my first long feature film, Signs of Life.
You sort of responded to it in the next paragraph to what your mother had said.
Yeah.
First of all, you say, I think I've learned to explain a thing or two, but I have a deep aversion to too much introspection, to navel gazing. That a paragraph I read so many times.
Yeah.
I read it to my wife. I'd rather die than go to an analyst, you write. because it's my view that something fundamentally wrong happens there. If you harshly light every last corner of a house, the house will be uninhabitable. It's like that with your soul. If you light it up, shadows, darkness, and all, people will become uninhabitable. I'm convinced that it's psychoanalysis, along with quite a few other mistakes, that has made the 20th century so terrible. And as far as I'm concerned, the 20th century in its entirety was a mistake.
Well, it's a very condensed way to say it. Yes, when you take a good look at the 20th century in its entirety, it probably was a mistake. And it's because of the two catastrophes of world wars, the Holocaust, the atomic bomb, the population explosion from 1.5 billion to now 8 billion or 9 billion. That's catastrophic because we are wasting, so many of us are wasting too many resources of our planet, all planted in the 20th century. Now, at the end of the 20th century, 8 billion human beings, and we are wasting and using up too many resources. This planet cannot deliver that much, and we are destroying it. So very destructive seeds were planted in the 20th century, and now we are struggling with it. So, but it sounds like a big proclamation. Yeah, the 20th century in its entirety was a mistake. There's also a little bit humor in it. You don't have to take everything like from a gloomy sort of German who makes a statement like that.
I don't want you to think that I did at all. I just think it's I think it's electric writing. I think it's wonderful, and obviously there are many wonderful things that came out of the 20th century. You know, you and I were born,
of course.
You know? But it is an interesting analysis. But it made me instantly think that the only follow-up question is well, how's the 21st century going?
Well, we are struggling,
yeah,
and we really have to do our best now. And since we are tied to history, it's not that we just live now in the 20th century. It has predecessors, and the predecessors are on our shoulders, and we have to acknowledge it. The memory in us we have to acknowledge, otherwise we wouldn't be human beings.
You described being in Crete on the donkey and seeing the windmills and fearing that you'd gone mad like your grandfather. You were around the same age, I think, 15, 16, when you got your first film camera. How did you acquire it?
How did I acquire my first film camera? I keep saying I expropriated it. Other people say I stole it, but there was a predecessor of a film school in Munich. The film school didn't exist yet, nowhere in Germany. And they had cameras that they would hand out for a few days to aspiring filmmakers. They never gave me one of those. And I was serious because I wanted to produce films. At age 15, 16, I worked the night shift as a welder in a steel factory to make money for my films. During the day I was in school. I dozed most of the time. Now in their technical department, they had a couple of cameras, 35 millimeter celluloid. And I checked one out and there was nobody around, and I walked out into the street and took a long lens and looked at the focus. And I noticed I was outside with a camera. And I decided, since it was a Friday, take it with you, film over the weekend, bring it back secretly, and that's that. However, on Monday I was still filming. On Tuesday I was still filming. So I kept it and I used it for my first 5, 6 films. And it was utilized for its real purpose.
Were you even a student at that school, or?
Well, I was in high school, but with classical bias, meaning Latin 9 years, ancient Greek 6 years, a little bit English at the end. Then I went to university, but I wasn't really there. I barely ever set foot into any of the lecture halls. I wasn't there because I earned money. I made films. I traveled. I was editing while I was still very young, 18, 19.
So, but that predecessor to the film school in Munich, I mean, it was some sort of school that had the cameras, right? Were you admitted to that school? Did you
No,
try?
there was no teaching. There was no teaching. It was an institute that happened to have some cameras and some flatbed editing machines, very clumsy and quite all right. But I took one of the cameras because they hardly ever gave it out to anyone. And if they gave it out to anyone, it was always the worst, the real mediocre ones, the uninspired.
Right, they were
And
given.
that somehow bothered me.
Right, you want to like give it to someone with some vision, some right.
Right, yeah.
So, and then you went to your exposure to the United States. Where did you go when you left Germany, came to the United States when you were 18? Yeah.
No, I was older. I was 22.
After,
I had yes.
So you did college in Germany, but some.
Yeah, college, but never being present. It was fraud.
Right.
I never really learned anything in any school. I'm always self-taught. And I had a scholarship, and I said, I want to go to Pittsburgh because it's a town of the steel workers, but it was already the beginning of the Rust Belt. And I gave up. I gave up because the school was not really good. Let's not name it, but it wasn't good. And
But it was it was less of a film school and more of a television studio. I mean, it's just.
It was.
Yeah.
It was a complete mistake that I ever went there. I didn't know, and I went out, left my studies, quote unquote, and had to make a living somehow. And I was homeless outside of Pittsburgh, and I was picked up by a wonderful family, a local family, and they had.
You were just walking on the street or something.
I was walking in the countryside, 15 miles outside of Pittsburgh, and a car passes me a few times on this road. A car passed me a few times, and it was raining. The car stopped, and there were a few young people in there, and the woman who is on the steering wheel says, "Hey, come in, you shouldn't walk in the rain." And within 2 minutes, all the way up to the hill, she asked, "Who are you?" And I explained, and she's, "Hi, you are from Germany." I said, "Yes, I'm a Kraut." So everybody in the car laughed. And she said, "Where you are staying, that's a wacko. Why don't you come to us? We have a place in our attic." And there was some sort of junk things in there, but one bed, and I stayed. And I lived with him for half a year. And I saw the best of America, and that's what I love about America. I love Los Angeles, where I live. People immediately combine it with the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, but that's not it. All the important things, many important things come from here. The internet, reusable rockets, built inside of the perimeter of the city, many, many good, important things. But my real heart is with the heartland of America. And I have worked in Wisconsin, I've worked in Pittsburgh, I've worked in Louisiana, North Carolina. I love the heartland.
This family, the Franklins, you connected with all of them in this very meaningful way.
Yes, the family, the Franklins, they were so generous and so much the very best of human beings, the best of America you could ever imagine. And I had the luck to run right into this. I was very, very lucky to experience the best of the heartland.
You had to leave the country because you essentially left school in Pittsburgh, right? And you're on a student visa, and you went into Mexico.
Well, what happened since I had a student visa, I started to work for a TV station. And it was about scientific research for NASA. And there was an incident, a technical incident in security checks after that. They found out that I had somehow violated my visa status. I was not allowed to work, and I was summoned to immigration with my passport. They would have handed me my expulsion orders. So I didn't want to return to Germany, so I had a very old Volkswagen, rusted through. On the passenger seat, you could see the road because it,
I love that.
it was rusted through. And I took the car and went to Mexico, and I had to live in Mexico, and I survived somehow by doing the rodeo clowns in Mexican rodeos in charreadas. But I earned money for the coming week, and so I was always injured and always...
So you were a welder, right, in Germany.
Yes.
You were a rodeo clown in Mexico.
Well, I had to earn money.
I understand.
And I'm not somebody who complains. I roll up my sleeve and what's out there? What can I do? So, and that was an opportunity for me, and I'm not a coward. And I cannot even ride a horse. I can't ride a horse, but there are these wild bulls, young bulls, but they clear 6-foot-high fences. And of course, I never stayed on their back more than, I don't know, a second, 2 seconds, and then I was airborne.
I love your jobs. You were a fisherman at night, a night fisherman? I don't even know what you'd call that.
Yeah, in Greece, but briefly, all short jobs to make a living for the moment.
You imported stereos in
Yes.
Mexico also?
Yes, there was a weak point at the time, and you have to see 1963. 1964, there were no drug cartels or hundreds of thousands of people trying to make it across the Rio Grande. The twin cities, Reynosa and McAllen in Texas, they had day laborers from Mexico who would cross in the morning and return in the evening. And there were 3 or 4 lanes, special lanes for the day laborers. And they had a sticker in their windshield. And I got one of these stickers. You were waved through somehow summarily. They didn't even look at you. And I was waved back into the United States. So, and I brought some stereo equipment for rich rancheros, which was, I smuggled them in because they had to pay high taxes for it.
I was really drawn to all of your jobs. Where is that wonderful?
Yes, but you see these jobs have also formed my character.
Yes, of course. Right.
And you learn for filmmaking, yes, you have to be self-reliant, you have to be bold, you have to seize the occasion, and you have to really move in the dirt and in the mud.
You took these jobs because you needed money. The idea of doing nothing was, I think, abhorrent to you.
Yeah.
You write in the book that the culture of complaining disgusts you.
It is true, but culture of complaint, as I describe it in my memoirs, goes much deeper than average complaints. It's because as a child we were hungry, and my mother had a loaf of bread for 1 week. We only got it for coupons, families with children. And she would make a groove Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so. And it was enough for 1 thin slice of bread for my mother, for my older brother, and me. And we were hungry. It was not enough. By Friday, normally we had eaten everything. Saturdays, Sundays were bitter. And it's okay for children. They can take it to be hungry. But mothers who cannot feed their children anymore, that's really, it's heartbreaking. And how my mother did that, I can only look at with great, great awe. And she, when we were wailing at her skirt, she spun around abruptly and looked at us very calmly And she said, boys, if I could cut it out of my ribs, I would cut it out of my ribs, but I can't. So you keep quiet, don't complain. So the culture of complaint that you see quite often around you doesn't impress me. I don't like it. But you don't have to learn it from me. I have a history, or I have an upbringing that is unusual. Growing up in ruins, growing up in a post-war society that had created the biggest catastrophe that we have ever seen on this planet.
You were born in 1942, so you were born right
in the middle of the Second World War.
In
yes.
Munich?
Yes.
But very quickly, your mother took you to Bavaria, took you and your brother to Bavaria.
Well, we were bombed out, and I was only 2 weeks old, 14 days old, and my mother found me in my cradle with a thick layer of glass shards and bricks and debris on top of me, but I was unhurt. But she was scared, of course. A mother has to be scared. She fled with my older brother and me to the remotest valley in the mountains. I mean, really remote. And that's how I grew up, without knowing anything of the world out there. But it was a wonderful childhood in poverty and adventure and becoming self-reliant very early on.
So this notion of this circumstance of you and your brother and your mother being hungry, this was not a couple of months. This was a consistent issue during the war, and then even
2 years, 2.5 years after the war.
It was worse, hungrier after the war, after 1945.
Right, yeah.
So, and then that was having left Bavaria. And when did you leave Bavaria and move back to Munich?
Well, for school, we had to move into a larger city. We lived outside a tiny village, and there were only lumbermen and cattle farmers, and that was that. So I could have ended up as a lumberman, or maybe an athlete, because I wanted to fly on skis off ramps. And my earliest dream was to fly and become the world champion. Of course, I never would have become a world champion, but I was seriously in it, and the dream of flying is still in me, but it had an abrupt end because my very best friend at that time on the ramp while we were training alone had a catastrophic accident that almost killed him. And I was alone with him, and it was so horrifying how I saw this crash that I never dared to get close to one of these ramps again. You described it in the book. You thought it seemed like he would die. You were relieved when he finally became unconscious. Yes,
he couldn't speak. He'd lost his teeth, but he ended up okay. He survived the injury, although got headaches when the weather got bad. Right?
Yes.
The lingering effects. So during the war, you wrote. So you were, I guess, forgive me if I named the town wrong. Rosenheim?
Yeah.
A town about 40 kilometers away, which is about 30 miles, something like that. And you write, and it was burning. It had been bombed by the Allies. And you write, I knew outside of that, outside of our tight valley, was a whole world that was dangerous and spectral. Not that I was afraid of it. I was curious to know it. Right?
Yeah.
You didn't think to run from that, really. I mean, obviously you're a little boy, but...
I was very young, and for me the world was just this little farmhouse, the waterfall in the ravine behind it, and that was the world. But when there was carpet bombing of the city of Rosenheim 40 miles away, you didn't see fires flickering, but at the end of the valley, the entire sky was red and orange and slowly pulsing. It was pulsing. And my mother said, the city of Rosenheim is burning. You have to see that. I woke you up in the middle of the night. And since then I know, yes, there's a world out there. It's different, it's dangerous. There's such a thing as a war. There's such a thing like Germany. I never knew that there was such a thing like Germany. For me, the world was this tiny little valley, and that was it. That was the world. And I became curious, and I ventured out.
Your parents, you say in the book, they were early National Socialists. They were on board with the Nazi Party very, very early.
Yeah.
But it didn't last as long with your mother as your father.
Yes, it is correct. My parents were Nazis. My mother saw the disaster looming that was created by it fairly early and completely withdraw from all politics. My father was kind of bitter about the Germany's defeat, even after the catastrophe that Germany had created. But I never had much contact with my father. I barely knew him, so I never had any meaningful conversation with him. But my parents were not an exception. The vast, vast, vast majority of Germany were Nazis and had hopes in a bright future under National Socialism until it turned barbaric. And that was something that some of the people noticed and some of the people way, way, way too late. The National Socialism under Hitler created a form of barbarism that is unprecedented in human history. It created the Holocaust, which is an event of a magnitude and barbarism that the world has never seen before or after. And this is something where you are compelled to start thinking, what the hell happened? How did Germany in such few years from a very civilized country lapse into barbarism? And I mean barbarism of a magnitude that is out of any proportions, out of anything the world has ever seen. And the scariest, may I add one thing? Yeah. The scariest about the Holocaust for me is, yes, there have been genocides, but it was an industrialized genocide. It took the shape of an industry. And strangely enough, that's the strangest and the scariest of all.
When you came back to Munich after the war, you returned, I guess, unbelievably, to the same building that you had lived in where you were born,
yeah.
Right? And in that building, another resident, shockingly, is this young actor trying to make a name for himself on the Munich stage named Klaus Kinski.
Yeah.
And you write that nearly everyone, the landlord, your mother, maybe your brothers, by then you had two brothers living with you, right? Maybe they were afraid of him, but you weren't.
Well, it was a statistical coincidence that Kinski ended up in the same boarding house. He was accepted there and fed for free and had a little room for free. And he immediately wrought havoc. He terrorized everyone. He was like a tornado. You could watch a tornado and the havoc wrought by a tornado. And everybody was terrorized. And I was kind of curious. I was not afraid. I was curious. What the hell do I witness? I was only 13, 12, 13. That I would work with him 12 years later, I never thought, or 16 years later, and because at that time I didn't plan to make movies.
How would he terrorize people? What was it? I mean, he was...
Well, he would, for example, have fits of rage and lock himself in the bathroom and destroy it methodically for 2 days and 2 nights. Leave every single thing in there, bathtub, toilet bowl, wash basin, in smithereens, and then emerge pale with foam at his mouth. And on and on and on. Every day something like that. Every day. So I knew what was expecting me, and but I was not afraid, and I knew he was an actor who had a presence and authority on screen that you hardly ever see. In film history, we have very, very few. Who comes to mind is a young Marlon Brando. He had that sort of command of the screen. Kinski, in a different, crazier way, had it. But I knew it will be very, very hard to domesticate the beast, make all the craze, all the maniac attitude of him productive, not for destruction around, make it productive for the screen. And that's my achievement. 5 films with him.
Yes.
5 films. Every white hair on my head I call Kinsky.
Yet you obviously you kept going. So the first one is Aguirre.
Aguirre, the Wrath of God, yeah.
And though you'd seen his mania in action, it still must have been something to see on this film set, which is such a, you know better than anybody. This is an unbelievable. There's no more collaborative art form than making a film, right? And so it's not just you experiencing his mania; it's the entire crew.
I think I have to say something to correct you.
Oh, please.
It's not absence of collaboration. It was very intense collaboration. We had a deep understanding about the role, about the story, about the environment. We understood it and we accepted it, and I channeled things. There was very, very intense collaboration. Sometimes I allowed him to go pretty wild and be the architect of some of the character. Yes, also, but and Kinski could be very genial, very generous, a wonderful man, and within a second it would change and he would destroy everything around him in screaming fits. So he had to outlast it, outweight him.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I meant that collaborative in the sense that everyone else involved in making this film also ends up experiencing the hurricane, the tornado that is Klaus Kinski.
Well, that's correct. You see, every single actor on the set, after 2 days set, I'm walking off the set. I'm not prepared to have this pestilence next to me for another second. The team was at the verge of mutiny. But I kept them together saying, don't you see how incredible this guy is? He is a skunk. He is the pestilence. But let's accept it because the result will be formidable. And so, they went along and it was okay.
The result was formidable, yet, as happens with so many great pictures, the reaction, particularly in Germany, was at best indifference and at worst hostility.
For many of my films, I had some kind of hostility with German audiences and neglect and so. But it's a German attitude. They never like their poets. Only when they are dead, they start to like them. And I can take it with good humor. But some of my films, after quite a few years, became successes. Aguirre, The Wrath of God, took 10 years, a whole decade, until it became successful.
What's that wonderful story that at the time I don't know whether it was a festival, but some jury determined that it was so worthless that it couldn't, even the lowest form of recognition for a German film gets the theaters that show it a tax break. So every movie is like, well, it's worthwhile in this way, right? But they couldn't, for Aguirre, no. They thought absolutely nothing worthwhile.
Today you look at it with humor.
Right.
That the film was literally banished from theaters because it didn't get an evaluation by a committee which took the burden of taxes away from theaters. Everybody got it, but this film didn't get it. It was so phenomenally bad that the jury couldn't decide for anything. So I take it with humor, and you know, I always knew the film is so strong it will find its audience. Time is on my side.
Then obviously we need to speak of Fitzcarraldo, and hand in hand with the documentary about the making of it by Les Blank, A Burden of Dreams, which is really about you making it.
Yeah.
The reason the documentary works is because in the film is the story of a man who, in order to raise money to build an opera house, is going to, and then acquire the rubber that will make him the money, wants to take a ship essentially over a small mountain from one river to another, right? And then you did it, right, for the movie. Then you become the man obsessed with taking the ship over the mountain, and you had two ships. So tell me where.
In fact, there were two identical ships that I had to build. Not only did I have to build it, we had to build infrastructure. There was no ship wharf in the jungle. And it's large ships. They are 320, 340 tons in weight, and move that over a mountain without modern technology, Stone Age technology, basically. So we knew it was, and I knew it was difficult, but it was doable. I only do the doable. I don't do the crazy things where I end up in a wild defeat and I cannot finish a film. I finish a film. And
there was a moment where there had to be some incentive, and certainly always with many of your films, money is an issue. But to say that we can't do it, we've got to leave. But that is not, you don't see that as an option.
What was significant, 20th Century Fox was interested to finance and produce a film, but they wanted to produce it with a small plastic replica of a ship over in a jungle, a good jungle. And I said, what's a good jungle? And they thought we should do it in the Botanic Garden in San Diego. And I said, no, it has to be really shot in a big jungle and big rivers and everything. And it's not what you think, that there's an iron will and an obsession behind it. I knew it was doable, but it's the strength of the vision. I saw it so clearly, and it's such a big metaphor embedded in us. I saw this, and there are some metaphors like that have become common to us, like, let's say, Don Quixote riding with his lance against the windmills, or the hunt for the white whale, Moby Dick. Right. It's a very big, something big inside of us. And a ship over a mountain in the jungle is one of those things where I knew it was something big inside of us and I could articulate it.
Was it on Fitzcarraldo or Aguirre where Klaus Kinski shot the top digit off a crew member's finger?
Well, it was during the shooting of Aguirre, The Wrath of God. Sometimes he could be dangerous. He had a separate hut and we had some huts, very provisional, thatched roofs, bamboo walls, and 35 of our extras after work were playing cards, had a good time, were laughing. Kinski was disturbed that there were people laughing some 100 feet away, and he took his Winchester, a real Winchester, and fired 3 shots through the hut with densely packed people. That he did not kill anyone was a miracle. He shot only part of a finger away from one of the extras. And of course, that was a moment I had to intervene, and I confiscated the rifle, and I still have it.
You still have that rifle?
Yes.
I want to talk about some other things you have. So,
but you see, if you scream on my set and throw a tantrum, I can tolerate that if I make it productive for a screen. But you do not shoot a real bullet from a Winchester rifle into the hut with extras. You just do not do it. I have to stop that.
Back to Fitzcarraldo. So the story of what you and the crew endured on that is again, there's a whole documentary about it, A Burden of Dreams by Les Blanc. It's a wonderful documentary. And the movie is wonderful. I'm curious whether, because you've gone through hardship on a number of films, but it sounds to me like there were moments in Fitzcarraldo where maybe for the first time, and maybe for the only time, that you at least feared that maybe the crew stopped believing in you. Like you didn't have the full support of the team making your film. Is that true?
It is true there were moments where it was very precarious, and only my fire within somehow carried us. The strength of my vision carried everyone along, even though many of them did not believe I could move the ship over the mountain. And all this is well documented. Of course, you have Fitzcarraldo, the movie. You have a wonderful film by Les Blanc, Burden of Dreams. But there's a third thing. I wrote a book based on diaries. It is called Conquest of the Useless. And it's very strange, very intense prose. It's like writing about fever dreams in the jungle. And much of what I'm writing is like fever dreams. It's not that much a day-to-day report of what happened. It's more the fever dreams. And all of a sudden you have three elements, and all of them point to something. Yes, it was very difficult, but it's the nature of the beast. Cinema is always difficult. Nobody should complain about it. And yes, there were moments of despair and moments where things could have been stopped, but I wouldn't allow that. I was carrying it, and it was a conviction. It was not iron will or anything like that.
The plane crash, the thing that always gets me most, of the plane crash where 5 crew members injured, one quite seriously, and then the snake bite. That to me is, again, it's not a metaphor because it happened. I mean, but it's emblematic of what you and the crews you work with have gone through to make these extraordinary pictures. You had a crew member get bit by a very dangerous snake, and he thought the clock was ticking, right?
Yeah.
About what did he do?
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of local people. We had to cut a swath of jungle where we would pull the ship over this hill. And they worked with chainsaws, and one of them barefoot. I was also barefoot in the jungle, always. He was bit twice in the foot by a snake, the most dangerous. And knowing that with this venom, your heart stops within 120 seconds, your breathing stops within also about 120 seconds. So he had dropped his chainsaw, picks it up from the ground, starts it with his cord, and calmly cuts off his foot. And that's because he survived, because the venom didn't have time enough to spread. He instantly cut off his foot. And there are tough people out there. And by the way, I would have done the same, because the camp with our doctor and with our serum anti-venom thing was 20 minutes away. So you have no chance. You would be dead on arrival.
Still, it is. I mean, it is. It goes to the body of what you. I mean, all these films that you've made, the body of your experiences. I think for any filmmaker, many bold filmmakers in the world, nobody has the collection of stories of pushing yourself and the crew, mostly yourself, to extraordinary limits, to where you're able to describe that event. I mean, that would be the most dramatic event in 98% of people's lives. You've experienced a number of those events.
Yes, I have experienced a lot, as if I had lived 10 times over already.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of the memoirs, that it's so condensed. When you read it, you will not be bored.
No. Oh my goodness, I've already read parts of it twice. Let's move around a little bit. Who is Bruce Chatwin?
Bruce Chatwin was an English writer of enormous talent. He wrote books like In Patagonia, when he traveled to Patagonia. Not a travel book, it's a much deeper view of the world, and has written wonderful books. And I met him in Australia because I wanted to make one of his books into a movie, which actually happened later. And he was somebody who was very, very solid, highly intelligent, highly well-read, but very solid, traveling on foot a lot of time. And
he felt the same way about traveling on foot.
Yeah. I had traveled on foot also, so that made a immediate connection.
But that notion that it changes your experience, it just changes how you interact with people, with the world,
Yes,
when you're on foot.
It's true, yeah. It forms a worldview. The world reveals itself to those who travel on foot. It's like a dictum. You mentioned it before. So we had sporadic, very intense encounters. Wonderful discourse with him, wonderful meetings, and unfortunately he died very young. And when he was dying, he summoned me to his deathbed. I did not know he was dying, but he was busy dying. And it was shocking to see him. There was nothing left of him. There was only a skeleton with big glowing eyes. And he wanted to see my film that I just finished on nomadic tribes, people in the southern Sahara. He had seen these tribesmen before, wanted to see this film, but he saw 10 minutes and he lapsed into unconsciousness, and then he woke up again and said, I want to continue seeing it. So he saw, bit by bit, he saw the entire film. It was the last time he saw images projected, and then he would wake up from his delirium and shout out, I've got to be on the road again. I've got to be on the road again. And I said, yes, Bruce, that's where you belong. And then he looked at his legs and he said, but there's nothing left of me. I cannot carry my rucksack anymore. And I said, Bruce, I'm strong. I can carry your rucksack for you. When you are back on the road, I carry your rucksack. And then when it was clear he was dying, he said, you have to carry this rucksack now, from now on. And it's a very beautiful, massive leather rucksack, like in the 1930s, made by a settler in central England. And I have it, and I use it. And it actually saved me. I was on Cerro Torre in Patagonia doing a film with mountain climbers, and I was stranded on a ridge, dropped by a helicopter, and a storm surprised us. Within seconds, storm, 150 miles an hour storms. You cannot believe what that means. We had to dig a little cave into a solid ice and snow wall and seal it up, and 20 degrees Celsius below zero. And we had nothing. We had no sleeping bag, no tent, no food, nothing.
And you have to dig that to protect yourself from the wind.
Yes, you will. You in a little ice cave, you preserve your body temperature. It's something like a little above freezing temperature, and so we spent there 55 hours, and I was sitting on Bruce Chatwin's rucksack because it kept me. I was sitting on a slab of ice, and you lose body temperature easily to the environment if you're not sitting on something. And I sat on Bruce's rucksack. I have it here, by the way. It's always around.
This is the one he used on everywhere he went on his travels, right? This was a big part.
He was always with his rucksack, yes. I do have to travel sometimes with something a little bit larger when I make a film, of course. But he loved my writings. Bruce Chatwin had in this rucksack a few books, 2 or 3 books. One of them was a book I had written. I didn't know when we met for the first time, and it was my first published book, Off Walking in Ice, when I traveled on foot from Munich to Paris because my mentor, an old Jewish woman who was my mentor, was dying, and I would not allow her to die. I said, I come on foot like a pilgrimage. I will not allow you to die.
You walked?
And she was alive, actually, when I arrived.
That's Lotte
Eisner,
yeah.
who was and is still very dear to my heart. I owe her a lot.
You walked from Munich to Paris?
Yes.
How long did that take? Seems like a very simple, silly question, but I'm curious. How long did that take?
It's under 1,000 kilometers, so you can walk 1,000 kilometers in a month easily, 30-something kilometers a day. But the problem was, it was November, December, and the winter arrived very early, and you had strong storms, gales against you, and slush and snow and rain, ice cold rain in your face. And when you bicycle against strong wind, it's really hard. It's the same thing with traveling on foot. You have to lean, you're walking always with leaning into it. So it most of the time it was bitter and hard, but it doesn't matter. You see, the essential things, the very essential things in my life I would do on foot.
The temptation, and I'm curious why you don't. I mean, the temptation to say, all right, I've walked 500 kilometers, I've walked 350 kilometers, it's winter, the wind is blowing, I'm miserable, I'm going to get a car, I'm going to go to the airport, and I'm going to fly to Paris.
That was my first reflex, checking into flight schedules, checking into train schedules. After 5 minutes, I say, this is wrong. I'm not going to fly, I will walk, because I will not give her a chance to die. I will walk up against her fate.
Where did that come from? Where is that?
I don't know. I do not know. I have it in me. It may sound silly, and it may have been a silly sort of venturing out on foot. But I do not regret a moment. And the beauty of it is 1 million steps in revolt against her dying. She will not die. She must not die. I will not allow it. And I arrived. She didn't know that I was coming. I arrived and she was out of hospital. And she was about 80. She lived another 8 years, and she summoned me and she said, you come by plane now, which I actually did. And she said to me, very biblically, very brief, very casually, she said, I'm almost blind. The joy of my life to read, I cannot do anymore. The other joy of my life to see movies, it's over. I'm almost blind. I'm almost, I cannot walk, only with crutches. I'm saturated of life. And it's like in the Old Testament, and Noah, having lived 820 years, saturated of life, died. And she said, I'm saturated of life, but there's still this spell upon me that I must not die. And you cast this spell, can you lift it? And very casually, as she said it, I said, Lotte, it is lifted. And she died 8 days later. And it was good.
Right.
I had no problem with it then.
This, not just a sense of adventure, but this, I don't know, almost messianic commitment to it, to do it your way. There has to be some price to pay for that, because you don't live like other people, those decisions. You know, maybe a little different now, but was there a price to pay personally for this decision to make decisions like continuing with Fitzcarraldo and to walk from Munich to Paris?
living a life like this, of course, demands a toll. Sure, but I knew about it and I would accept it. And I think I have lived full, whatever was out there. I was never ducking into the trenches and elude what was coming at me. And it has been wonderful, and it has left a series of films, a series of books. It has been meaningful. You see, I've never been out for happiness, but I wanted to live, to have a meaningful life, where things like justice, for example, or meaningful things doing was the center of it, not so much happiness.
It's funny, I'm reminded oddly of the American rock star John Mellencamp, who I spent some time with interviewing, and I said to him, you play this song, Jack and Diane, every night you go on a concert. Does that still make you happy? And he was like, no, I'm not in this to be happy. I don't do this. I'm not an artist. He paints too.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in happiness. I don't even really know what that is. I like the experience. I want to experience things.
People sometimes think I'm out for the experience and testing my boundaries. That's not my thing. Sometimes extreme mountain climbers do that.
Yeah.
Or endurance sports people do that. I'm not into that business. I've never been into this. I don't want to set records. I do not find it interesting to explore my limits or anything like this. It's much simpler. I try to be a good soldier of cinema.
Okay. Well, I think that's what he thought too. This is my art. This is what
I do, and you don't have to make much fuss about it. Traveling on foot is something we have done for tens of thousands of years. We are made for traveling on foot, but at the same time, I am a lazy bum like anyone else. I would travel on foot 1,000 kilometers, sometimes once 2,000 kilometers, only if there's a very, very deep quest behind it. Only then.
I don't know whether you would recognize this. There is a moment in your book, which I found one of the most romantic things that I've read in some time. You're married now. This is your third marriage, and you've been 25 years now?
I'm together 28 years. Never, from the moment I met my wife, I knew this is what I wanted. I have to live with her, and we never left from that first moment on. 28 years, I'm a very lucky bastard.
When you left Germany to come to the United States, where she was, right? And for a host of reasons, she had to be here. But she's here. You leave Germany to come here. You flew with nothing. You moved from Germany to the United States. What did you bring with you?
Well, I made mistakes in my previous life, but it's there. It's part of my what I am. So I thought, I give everything away that I owned. My apartment, my car, my money, my books, my clothes, everything. And I come back, I put my house in order. I come back, and the only thing that I owned was a toothbrush, which actually landed me 6 hours in interrogations at immigration. It was suspicious.
Well,
they did backup checks and whatever. But reason for this was I wanted to come back to her after a few days. I wanted to come back. There's no status. There's no films. There's no prestige. There's no money. There's no fancy car. It's only me. It's me. Only me, the man, the person. And that's it. So I have nothing to offer. Only me, myself. So, and she could have sent me, go and brush your teeth somewhere else. But she accepted me. And I'm in America, and I'm in Los Angeles because I fell in love very deeply, and I've been very lucky. I'm not here because of Hollywood. I'm here because I'm in love. But I started to love Los Angeles, and I was always in love with the heartland of America.
The passport control, the customs officer said he'd never seen anybody come on a transatlantic flight without a piece of luggage.
Yes.
Yeah. And so they brought you back. They questioned you. You said, for how long?
Well, I was taken out of the line and I think interrogated for 6.5 hours or so, and backup checks and all sorts of things, because nobody in the customs man said to me, a very nice man, he said to me, on an intercontinental flight, everyone has some luggage. Men come with an attaché case if they have nothing. Women at least have a handbag. So you have nothing. And I said, yes, I do have luggage. And it was stupid and conceited and whatever. I reach into my pocket and I produce my toothbrush. That's my luggage. And I was right into interrogation.
I don't know whether you've thought of this, but it is notable then that as a man who arrives from Germany with nothing but a toothbrush goes on to play the villain in a Jack Reacher film, because the character of Jack Reacher travels around the country, often on foot, solely with a toothbrush.
Yeah.
That's and you played opposite Tom Cruise. You were the bad guy. You've played the villain often. When you act.
Well, I was dragged into acting, but I enjoy it tremendously, and I do it well. I know I do it well, but only for very specific parts. I have to play either the real badass bad guy who has barely any fingers and one eye blind, like in Jack Reacher, and only with a quiet voice I had to spread terror, which I do. That was the whole meaning of it. Or in The Mandalorian, I'm playing a character that should not be trusted at all. So, and I can deliver, but I swear to God, it's a performance. You have to make a distinction. It's a performance. My wife's friends in Paris made frantic calls. Are you married to that man? We can give you shelter. We are only a night flight away. So, and that was one of the things where I knew that I was good. I was a good villain.
You also, and you got along very well with Tom Cruise, right? Everybody seems to get along well with. Yeah.
He's has been a very, very generous comrade on the set, very respectful and phenomenally well prepared. I mean, I've never seen anyone in all aspects what he's doing. Preparation, and that means physical preparation, nutrition, knowing the part, knowing what he's doing. So professional, like no one else I've ever seen.
You came to the United States from Germany to live alone, just with a toothbrush. He has like many big stars, he has a big entourage. You asked him, do you have a psychiatrist for your dogs?
Well, I made a joke, so
it's a good one.
Of course.
It's a good one.
Yeah,
but it's almost the either the best or the worst joke, depending on your perspective, that you could make to a Scientologist, right? They don't make a lot of psychiatrist jokes.
Well, whatever. But my point was this: we are in an environment where there are 200 people all working on the same film, and so some of the protagonists in front of the camera, they have to set an example of being decent worker and decent behavior and spread a climate of camaraderie, which we did. And I would joke with him and make, because everybody was very reverential and everybody was kind of afraid. And I said, did you bring with all your entourage also the psychiatrist of your dog? We laughed very hard over it. Of course, it was a joke and he knew it. And the same thing happens even with the Dalai Lama. I made a film where the Dalai Lama is one of the key figures. And he says to me, in our discourse, everything, when you look at the world, everything, this mountain is the center of the universe. This this figure made of sand depicts the center of the universe. Everyone is the center of the universe. And he says, I am the center of the universe, and so are you, pointing at me, so are you. And I said, Your Holiness, without missing a beat, Your Holiness, yes, but don't tell my wife. And he laughed a lot. So you see, you have to have the right answer right away.
In conversations like this, what is the key to connecting with someone, getting them to reveal something that is just meaningful, right?
When I look at the world as a filmmaker and I have to interact, let's say, with an inmate in Texas on death row who will be dead in 8 days, and I've done a film, Into the Abyss, you have to engage, and you have very limited time and very limited space. So you have to engage in such a meaningful and direct way. And of course, the key to it, you have to be a good listener, but you have to interrupt if necessary.
That's right.
And it's a way of interacting with somebody. And death row is the best example where you really have to be focused, really to be the best of listeners, but also somebody who has the boldness to interfere, even though you know this young man will be dead in 8 days.
Because to me, it's of course you have to be a good listener, but you also have to. There's an observational component too, that, and that's reading the room, reading them.
Yeah.
In that same film, in Into the Abyss, you interrupted the pastor.
Yes.
Who is there in the chamber with the condemned man when he dies, when he's executed, and he was telling some, I don't know, dreamlike story about, observing life around him, and that's how he finds his serenity. And you asked him, tell me about an encounter with a squirrel. And and it changed his manner of thinking.
Yeah.
And he told a wonderful story, a human story, an authentic story, right? But where had he mentioned that he has a good squirrel story? No, I did. I sensed that he had not.
Well, there are things you cannot learn in film school.
Right.
You learn it in life. And when the pastor who is in the death chamber assisting the dying convict, he tells me at the cemetery where you have these anonymous crosses only with numbers, how beautiful the world is and everybody in harmony, and deer in the early morning when he's at the golf course looking at him and the birds singing and so. And I thought, this is wrong. I want to hear something more of substance. And I interrupt him and I ask him, tell me about an encounter with a squirrel. And all of a sudden he's shaken. I don't know why, and he says he almost ran over a squirrel with his golf cart a few mornings ago, and how precious life is. And here, in 20 minutes, he will be in the death house and will witness somebody dying. And it shouldn't be like that. And all of a sudden, he becomes deep and becomes very human. And a very touching moment. And I trigger it with a question, tell me about an encounter with a squirrel. God forbid, you cannot learn that in film school. Did
you really learn much? Obviously, most of what you learned from doing, overwhelmingly.
Yeah.
But you read 40 pages in an encyclopedia on how to make a movie or how to use a camera, right? I mean, that was your film school. You just read. My film school was reading in an encyclopedia of 20, 40 pages. You do not need much more to understand. You see, I will never understand the intricacies of a digital camera here. I know the principle, and that's fine, and that's enough. And thanks God, there are eyes out there, the cinematographer and the camera, and I really am very fond of them. And you know what the sound is doing, and you should not touch the mic here. And so you learn these basic things, and all the rest you cannot learn in film school. You better learn it on your own. In my case,
since I'm completely self-taught, I learned from my mistakes. I'm a product of defeats, of mistakes.
You say that
And I learned quickly.
you also said that you really, when you watch movies, and movies were not a big part of your life as a kid growing up. You had no exposure to them. Now, when you watch movies, you only learn from the bad films.
It is true, I have only learned from bad films. It's always easier to describe the sin than the virtue. A bad movie, you can immediately tell, oh my God, don't do it like that. But when you have a great movie, it is so awe-inspiring. I look at it with such awe that I can never figure out how did the director do that. I cannot figure out. And I take it as it is, and I'm still in awe, and I never learn from the great films.
You were watching as a teenager one of the Fu Manchu movies, and your eye, that Werner Herzog eye, you caught something, and it changed how you watch film.
You have to understand that you are sitting with somebody who did not know that cinema existed until I was 11 years old. I didn't even know it existed. So in the city of Munich, I started to watch cheap B pictures, Tarzan, Dr. Fu Manchu, and I noticed in one film that a bad guy who was shot out from a rock and somersaulting down appears a second time 20 minutes later in another battle, a little bit shorter cut, but he somersaults through the air and does a strange kick in midair. And I saw that it was recycled. And all my friends said, no, this cannot be recycled because he was shot dead. A dead man cannot climb up on this rock again. And I saw it, and I started to think, how do they add shot after shot after shot? How do you tell a story with a short shot and then the next? How do they create, and later the more difficult things, how do you create suspense? How do they do that? And I learned it all from very, very mediocre films.
Change the way you watch movies.
I still watch movies the same way. I always give them a bit of sympathy ahead, no matter how much bad things I have heard. I give them, every movie has as much sympathy ahead as I have black under my nail. And I watch a movie with sympathy, but I see, oh, well, it's so bad. And only from the bad ones I can learn.
Were you going to dig up Ed Gein's mother with Errol Morris in a small town in Wisconsin?
Well, Errol Morris at the time had a wild project about a mass murderer, Ed Gein. And
that's sort of essentially who the was inspiration for Psycho.
For Psycho, yes. I mean, the most gruesome sort of murders. Ed Gein had murdered people, but also excavated human corpses from the cemetery. And Errol Morris found out it was a circle. And he kept wondering, the very center of the circle was the grave of the mother of Ed Gein. Now, did Ed Gein also excavate his own mother or not? And I said, Errol, you will only know by digging. Go there at night, dig. If the grave is empty, you will know he has not done it. And he said, yeah, but shouldn't we do it together? I said, yeah, in a few months I'm traveling to Alaska. I can make a stopover in Wisconsin. And I showed up, and I had actually bought a spade and a shovel and a few tools, but Errol didn't show up, which was fine. I mean, ultimately, let's face it.
But you did. You showed up. That's incredible.
I was en route to Alaska. I would have passed nearby. I don't know, maybe we would have given up the plan as something silly and not, you shouldn't do it. We probably would have given it up anyway, because sometimes it's good to have a wild fantasy and then not live it. That's the beauty of dreams. It's the beauty of wild stories. And Errol is a wild storyteller, and so am I. and it was a concoction of this wild storytelling that we would dig at night and find out whether the coffin was empty.
I'm very envious of the determination, the seeing things through in your life. So a couple of things I just wanted to touch on. We didn't mention, and for Fitzcarraldo, before you got to Klaus, even before that, but Jack Nicholson was interested in that part.
Yes, at the time he liked my films. He had seen Aguirre, wanted to work with me, and there was, of course, talk about Jack Nicholson potentially playing Fitzcarraldo, and then of course he wouldn't go to the real jungle deep into Amazonia.
He would have gone to the botanical gardens in San Diego, but not.
We
not
do
to
not
South
know.
America.
We do not know here. But I love him. He's a wonderful, such a great, wonderful actor in the wonderful, crazy fantasies, and such a gifted man. And of course, then as I had to do it alone, it was cast with Jason Robards, and his sidekick was Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones. And Robards, after halfway through filming, became ill. We had to fly him to the States, and his doctors would not allow him to return. So that was a real blow, and I had to find someone new, and it was clear Kinski has to be it. I always thought about Kinski as well, but Kinski is like a racehorse that can run exactly, sprint at highest speed a mile and then collapse. But doing a film like Fitzcarraldo is 5 miles. 5 miles. And would he be capable to hold out that long? And it was very hard. And if Kinski hadn't done it, I would have done it.
You would have done it. You would have played it.
I would have done it. Because the main task, moving a ship over the mountain, was not cinema anymore. It was the task that I had to deliver. I had to do it. And I was struggling. I wouldn't have been half as good as Kinski, not half as good as Mick Jagger, not half as good as Jason Robards or Mick Jagger. So thanks God on my knees that I didn't have to play it.
We learned Jagger had to go because he had to go on tour with the Rolling Stones, and the delay meant that he couldn't come back and make the movie. But in the time that he shot with you, and then when Jason Robards was the lead, you learned what I think is pretty clear, that if Mick Jagger had decided to be an actor most of the time, he would have been an excellent actor.
Yes, I think it's one of the big things I have out there, a beef that I'm grinding with the film industry. How is it possible that the film industry did not discover Mick Jagger as a great figure for the screen? He has a presence, and he has something strange in him, even in very quiet moments. That's extraordinary. And I really mind that we don't have at least 10, 15, 20 films with Mick Jagger in leading roles.
Yeah, I agree with you. The ones that I've seen him, the one main picture that he's in, he's wonderful in, and then we see little bits in Burden of Dreams of him, and he's very good, very good.
And you see, when he's off stage, or off my camera, there was some sort of dealing about, I don't know, the drinking water and the bottled water and so. And I say, Mick, my camera is rolling and I do the slate all the time. Mick just does 5 steps, is in front of the camera. I do the slate and he's a demon. 5 steps from talking about mineral water. He's there and he's transformed.
In My Son, What Have You Done?, you cast Michael Shannon.
Yes.
And you described him, I believe, as the finest actor of his generation.
Yes.
I don't disagree, but it's not a widely held thought. It may be by people in the business, but it's not. Michael Shannon is not one of the most famous actors working.
Well, it doesn't matter whether he's the most famous or not. In his generation, I do believe he's the one with the greatest intensity, the deepest talent that you can see anywhere around. One exception, Joaquin Phoenix. You can count him on par with him. And Michael Shannon is still relatively young. Wait for the next 20 years, what is coming from him. He's big and he's wonderful, and I'm proud that I'm the one who gave him the first leading central role in a movie. He had played smaller parts in movies, but I was the first one for the leading part.
Yeah, I was very pleased to read that. Considering how important it is seen in the world of documentaries, there wasn't a great deal in your book about Grizzly Man. I wondered whether you thought, I've discussed this enough.
Grizzly Man has been discussed so much, and I have commented much. I've also commented much on my films. This is why my memoirs are not too much about film here and that film and that film and that film. I speak more about influences that shaped these films. Instead about talking about Aguirre, the character of Aguirre, I speak about an African revolutionary in the mid-60s on the island of Zanzibar.
That's John Okello.
John Okello, whom I found very, very, very fascinating. And he has shaped somehow the role of Aguirre. And I write more about John Okello than about Aguirre, the Wrath of God. And it's fine, it's good like that. I don't need to dig into every single film. There are too many anyway. And I'm quite nonchalant about it.
It's just that I know so many people to whom Grizzly Man is the most powerful documentary they've seen in some time. It still resonates with people.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Yes, it is. It is a very powerful film, but of course half the film was made by someone else, Timothy Treadwell, who perished, who died when he was filming. And he spent 11 seasons with wild grizzlies in the wilderness in Alaska. So you have to be clear. There's somebody who has delivered us footage that no film industry, no country can ever create. He created it, risking his life every single day.
When's the book out? Is it out?
It's out, yeah.
It's out. Okay, so, and right away, it's in the introduction. You write, I was just working on the end of my book. I looked up because I saw a flash across the window, something shooting at me, copper red and bright green. But it wasn't a stray enemy bullet she'd been speaking of. It was a hummingbird. At that moment, I decided to lay down my pen. The last sentence breaks off at the point I had just reached. Obviously, as a person who has no patience, I read that and skipped right to the end. And sure enough, this is the last part of your book.
Yeah.
There at the foot of the smooth concrete wall, there would be a crystal clear trickle of water from the rocks to the side. It would be sought out by herds of deer, as though,
and it ends.
So why I like that ending, aside from it being bold and inventive and very Werner Herzog-esque, is it suggests that you are not nearly saturated, that there is more to come from you.
Yes, there's more to come. In fact, as I'm sitting here, I finished already my next book, The Future of Truth, and I'm working on 2 feature films.
You're not saturated.
Well, who knows? Ultimately, you have to carry me out from a set feet first. That's what hopefully is going to happen.
Werner, thank you.
Thank
Lovely,
you.
lovely.
Very kind of you how you spoke with me.
Well, I love speaking with you, and it makes me feel better. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.